So it says it's preparing the Zoom meeting. I'm never sure if we're already live streaming at that point, so I'm gonna wait for that to. Okay, it looks like this is on. Great. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to those who are joining live and to those who are going to be listening to this later. This is our first office hour for localization, and today we're going to talk about common errors and mistakes that localizers make in Pontoon. But we're going to start with a quick intro. So I'm Delphine. I am the localization mobile program manager at Mozilla. And I'm going to be interviewing Flood about this topic today. Flood, do you want to tell us a little bit more about you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Flood. In case you missed the changes in the team, I started managing the localization team a couple of years ago now. But like I've been before that involved as the program manager for Firefox Desktop, and even before that, I was involved as a volunteer localizer. So I was part of the community. And I'm still part of the Italian community, so I help those folks doing the translations.
Great, thanks, Flood. Yes, I have to add that I'm on my side French, and I did start out at Mozilla by being a French localizer. So yeah, it's been a little while. So great. So let's dig in. First, I wanted to mention that we're both monitoring. I mean, I'm monitoring the YouTube channel as well as Matrix. So if ever there's anything you want to jump in and ask, I'll be monitoring that and making sure that gets addressed. So we have about 30 minutes approximately. Let's just dive right in because that's not a lot of time. Um, so my first question for you, Vlad, was what are some of like the most typical common mistakes, errors and translations we see happening in Pontoon?
Yeah, so I'm before I share my screen, I wanted to call out that we are going to look at some locales. The reason we are looking at these is simply because they are the most recent errors that we have seen, so they are very easy to find. The strings are still in Pontoon, so they are a good example to show what happens in this case, some type of error. If you have been working on Pontoon for a long time, some of these things might be obvious, some might be still new for you as well. So keep in mind that we are not pointing out at locales. It just happened to be some recent errors that we have seen. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
There we go. Um, by the way, if you haven't tried tab groups, they're very convenient. Um, Here's an example. One thing that we see happen, we see happening frequently, and I hope this is large enough. This is an example of a fluent string, and you can tell where like if you're not as familiar to Pontoon, you can see that this is a string in Firefox, is within a file called contextual manager. The FTL means that it's a fluent string, it's a fluent file, and you can also see comments that are going to help you localize the string. This specifically, it's a plural string. So you can see that there are three variants to translate. There is one like perfect match to the number one, the one category and the other category. But what I wanted to point out in this case is that, for example, you can see that in the machinery tab here on the right, there are two matches. There is one which shows it's 100% match, and there is one that shows that it's 80% match. And if you check these, you can see that like it's showing that there is a difference, and the difference is in the variable. So instead of using $sign total, is using $count. So if I click on this, it's going to copy from the translation memory with the wrong variable name. So one first thing is always check when you're like copying from translation memory or from the machinery. It can be coming from the Google Translate, for example. Always make sure to check the percentage of match. If it's not 100%, you can still copy and edit, but it's important to check what you're copying. The other thing that I wanted to call out is you can see that in the source string, part of the text is like highlighted with a gray background. That means that it's like usually a placeholder or a placeable or a variable, and you can click on it to copy it over. So you don't need to go and write like parentheses, $sign, and so on. That's very error prone. There is no point in doing that. You just click in the input field where you want to put that thing and just click to copy over. Another approach is just to copy the English string and then edit around if you want. But those are ways to avoid the errors caused by spelling, for example, variable names. One thing to note is that some of these errors are not displayed in Pontoon. So for example, if someone translates with the wrong variable, it's not going to show up here. Another similar error that we've seen is with ellipses. It might not seem very obvious, but like there is a difference between three dots, which is three characters, like three dots in a row, and one character for the ellipses. You can see that like in this case, the English text is using one character and it's gray, again, because you can just click and copy it over to your translation. The assumption is that all locales are using the same text as English, so one character for the ellipses. So we have checks to flag if a locale is using three dots. If your locale is not using three dots, you can let us know. For now, only Japanese is one that is not using these. At that point, it's up to you to keep the translation consistent within your locale. The other thing is always look out for the warnings when you do translation, especially in Firefox or Android. Let me see. This string, for example, is two things highlighted. The first one is a variable, and the second one is an apostrophe. But let's say I translate this and I forget to add the variable. Let me put this as a suggestion. So you see that Pontoon is going to complain and say, you are missing a variable. In this case, it's called formatter. You shouldn't be submitting this. You still can, like it's suggesting like suggest anyway, but like you shouldn't be suggesting string with warnings unless you're very confident that you're doing the right thing. And this is not the case for Android. Like if you are submitting a translation with an error like this, like what shows up as a warning in Pontoon, it's important to not do that because the build is going to explode. And we cannot have your translation in the build, so we are going to go in and fix them. So these are
Yeah.
three examples of things that we see quite frequently.
I just had a clarifying question because you said that these can still be in like oh, what's the word? These can still be validated or like you can still input that translation without the placeholder, but that's going to break builds. Is there a reason that you can still input it if this is going to break builds? Are there cases where there are workarounds for this?
Yeah, in other formats,
In
it's
other
like
formats,
it's
not
allowed. For example, in Fluent or Firefox, you
okay.
can have like a string without like for example, one very common case is um, strings that use Firefox as a subject of the sentence. Like
Right.
Firefox is going to do this, and Firefox is like a variable. Some locales want this to be impersonal, like the translation needs to be impersonal. So you
Hmm.
don't want to have like Firefox being an agent and doing something. So you are going to translate it as, for example, a passive form and say, this is being done.
Right.
So in that case, you need to drop the variable. But depending on the product, on the format, it's a warning and it's not like a blocker. That's why we need to use that as a warning and not as an error, which is like, okay, this is an error. You cannot submit this translation at all.
Right. Okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying. So those were the missing. Did you want to add anything else about missing variables in Android, or was that pretty
No,
much?
that's a good highlight of the main errors.
Okay, great. So what happens when we see these errors and when localizers see these errors? What should they do? Like, what's the solution to fix these?
So one thing that we have seen and that I mentioned is that in some cases, Pontoni is going to tell you something. It's either going to tell you this is an error, we cannot do like you cannot submit in translation, or it's going to tell you this is a warning, you should be double check that you want to submit this translation because it might be broken. The reality is that Pontoni is only covering a few of these errors. Like for example, is not checking for the ellipses that I showed before, like the consistency with the ellipses, or it's not checking if the translation is changing the HTML markup. For those, we have like external tools, like we have tools called linters that are working across different products, and we run checks and say, for example, flag if a translation is changing the HTML, like are there missing tags or
Right.
things like that. So these are not visible to localizers. So what's happening here is that the program manager in charge of the product is going to receive an email saying, you should look into this string because there is a possible error. This is an example of like a false positive. This is a Chinese translation, and you can see that in the source language, there is like high tag, which means italic or cursive text, which doesn't make any sense in Chinese. So the Chinese, in terms of script, doesn't need italic. So the localizer decided there is no point in me adding this. Actually, if it ends up writing the text in italic, it's going to be less legible. So let me drop this. It's showing up on our side in our checks as like this translation is changing the original markup, but we can add an exception on our side and say, no, this is a legitimate decision by the localizer, and let's create an exception for that. Uh, this one is another good example. Another thing that might happen is this is a string that we have seen in the previous question, like there is a variable, and this was the original translation that doesn't have the variable because it was copied from another string that I like Firefox are coded, which is not something that we do these days. So what happened is we received the notification that there is a problem with the string. We go in, like the PM goes in and reject the translation. We usually try to provide comments. So it's important that you check the comments and your notification. Like in this case, for example, there are two comments, and this is me saying the translation is missing a variable, and the localizer is responding and say, okay, understood. That's I know why you rejected this string. Um, there are two things here that I want to call out. Well, one thing that it's important it's a change that we added recently, and I'm going to increase the size as much as possible. You can see two things happening here. You will notice that under the profile image, there is like an admin in my case, because this is Firefox for Android. I'm not the PM in charge of this project. Dolphin is. So it's showing me as an admin. And I also know that this person replies is a translator for this locale and this project. So when you get a notification that your translation has been rejected, check who's doing that. Like if it's an admin or if it's the PM, it's probably because there is an error. Again, we try to um, provide a comment to explain why. Like in this case, for example, it's a manager. Let me see. In this case, paying is not just an admin, but is also the PM for this specific project. So it's going to show up
Mhm.
here. And there is documentation with all the nice badges. So there is a new user, useful, like this person is new. Should we be nicer or be nice? We should always be nice to users. Like as a manager, this person is new. Let's make sure they understand what they're doing. Translator manager, program manager, and the admin.
Great. Am I muted? No, I'm
Yeah.
not, right?
No, no, I can hear.
You can hear me. Okay. Thank you, Flood, for going over these. That's really helpful. I just saw on YouTube that one of the examples you were giving, one of the person that's translating is commenting on their strings. So I think this is this is useful. Um, so my next question for you is there a way to know when this happens? How do you know you have to check something as a localizer?
That's a very good question. As I pointed out, two things happen, for example, in the last example. Like in the last example, since the string was like breaking the build for Firefox for Android, I went in and rejected the string. That generates a notification in Pontoon saying someone rejected your translation. The second thing is the comment. Again, another notification. So when you get a notification, you're going to see it here. Like right now, I don't have unread notification, so it's gray. Otherwise, it's going to be red. Like for example, this person has added a comment. So you're going to see an example of this type of notification. Um, Now, let's see if Pontoon breaks with my notifications because there are too many. Um, for example, in this case, someone approved a translation that I made for Norwegian, but I'm sure there are rejected translation at some point. But the important thing is the system is designed to give you notifications when something important happens. The other thing that you can do now is in your settings. So if you click on your avatar and then go to settings, you can go into a lot of detail in which notifications you want to get. Like for example, I'm okay with getting notifications from pretty much everything on a daily basis. And I want to get an email when someone had a comment because I assume, okay, comment is more important than knowing if there is new suggestions for review. But the important piece of information to take away is that you can get emails. The other way that you get notifications is by installing the Pontoon add-on. So you can get them directly in your browser. So those are free ways, but ideally you get notifications from Pontoon and you get comments from PMs or admins to say, okay, there is something there to check.
Right, yeah, I use the add-on a lot. It's really, really handy. I get to see notifications much more immediately than if I hadn't been using it. So I really appreciate that add-on. Um, let's see. Are there other issues that you think it's important localizers know about and be aware of?
Yeah, let me stop sharing because this doesn't need Pontoon.
Okay.
We need your help to understand if there is something weird going on in Pontoon. One example that we realized recently is that we see new users coming in and starting to send hundreds, in some cases, thousands of translations, just copying them from machinery. So they copy them from Google Translate, or because there is a 100% match from translation memory. So they just copy over 1,000 translations across multiple locales. Again, I've seen a case of like person doing this across 20 languages. It might not be that there are like it might not be bad intention behind this, like they don't understand the system, they want to get the badges. I don't know. But the important thing is we might not notice this problem. So it's important that like translators and local managers let us know, hey, check this person because I think they don't understand what they're doing. They're just like submitting a lot of translation and they're just creating a bottleneck for translator for reviewers. It's not helpful. So it's important that you tell us if you see something bad happening on the platform. It can be spam, it can be user just testing the platform and like putting random translations that we have seen. It's not as frequent at the moment. Like, for example, the user doing machine translation, we have seen three or four in the last 6 months. And they were flagged by local managers saying, hey, look at this user. So we don't have system right now to catch them automatically, or for example, um, to flag them within Pontoon. Like we didn't work to implement a UI to say flag this user to the admins because it's very rare. But if it started becoming more of a problem, then we realized that we might need to invest on that. So we need help from translators and managers. The way you can do that is you can use matrix, you can add comment to the string and flag the PM, like you use the report context button. Any way it works for you as long as you reach one of the admins.
Yeah, and we're pretty diligent at looking at comments and messages we get, so feel free to reach out. Um, so my next question now would be, in general, are there things other than, just pontoon errors, typical errors and mistakes? Are there other things you would want to announce and call out today that we want to share?
Yes, one of the challenges of like doing community localization is that after the pandemic, we lost connection with the community. Like up to the pandemic, so up to the 2020, we used to organize in-person events. That was a way to get in touch with people on the ground, talk about the issues, brainstorm on how to improve community, improve the work that we do. That's something that has been missing, and it's already been 5 years. So one way that we try to recreate a connection with people is by doing these online events. We have done 6 or 7, I guess,
Hmm.
so far. Like Delphine has been organizing these. We have tried to be very consistent in like having at least a couple, 2 or 3 per uh, every 6 months.
Yes, yeah,
One of the challenges that we are not getting a lot of feedback, so it's feeling like we are kind of talking to the void in a sense.
yeah.
Um, we have two type of feedback. One is, for example, before this event, we ask people, what are the topics that you want us to cover? And we get not a lot of replies. And the same is for the feedback after, like, What do we need to change? What else
you
would
know,
you like to see? That's very hard to know if we are doing the right thing. How can we improve? How can we be more useful for the community? That is challenging without the feedback. So one way that you can help us is providing feedback on the
yeah.
events.
Yeah, I agree because when we were looking at stats, because these are streamed on both Air Mozilla and YouTube, and then they're recorded, so you views go up. Well, compared to the number of views, which was actually high up, I feel like we could be getting much more feedback. So let us know. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that. Um,
Yeah, and we typically share of the after the event like a survey, but like you can
yeah,
do again, we don't care how you do it. Like you can send us emails, you
yeah, you
can
can
write
just
on
like ping
Matrix,
us on Matrix or whatever. Like,
whatever works for you, it's
yeah.
reach out.
It doesn't have to be a Google form or whatever. That's just like, yeah, it can be through a lot of different avenues. Sorry.
The other thing, one piece of feedback that we have got over the years is again, in-person events. Uh, we hear you. It's something that we have been talking forever since like in the past, over the past 3 years at least. And as I mentioned, the last event happened in 2019. We did an event for Arabic in Tunis. We have been talking about it. The reality is that a lot has changed. There is a different perception about traveling. Like a lot of people think twice about moving because of like concerns on like the impact on the environment, but also like challenges in moving around and like borders and documents. So there is that to keep in mind. The other thing is that Mozilla is a very different company from 5 years ago. Uh, it's a lot more complicated to get budgets for these type of events compared to what it was like 5 years ago. And the team is quite a bit smaller than it used to be, while the number of projects and things to look out for is increasing,
Um,
as you are aware, because you see the number of projects that we have on content. So you're helping us translating this project. So there is a challenge there in terms of budget. Having said that, we are in the process of organizing one very small pilot event. It's going to be happening in June in Berlin. And I want to avoid surprises and set expectation. Again, the budget is limited because we want to understand what it takes now to organize an event. What are the things that we have support internally and externally to organize this type of event? How does it work? Is it still the right way to meet volunteers? Do we need to meet volunteers in a larger company organized event? So that's the idea and why we call it a pilot event because of the size and the amount of learning that we need to do for this event. Once we have organized the event, you're going to see blog posts explaining the process that we use to pick the people invited, what was the result, and what are the next steps, basically.
right. Hopefully this will inform and help set the future, well, for future events. Who knows? We will see.
Yeah, the general idea is let's try with
Yeah.
the people that we have right now to understand what does it take to organize an
Yeah.
event. Um, what does it cost, for example, how much time we need, and can we scale to do multiple events a year, and how
Right.
long does it take? Like even to get to this point, it's like a 9 months work,
Mm, right.
even
And
for
to
just
remind
this small
folks, like,
pilot.
we're not event organizers. That's not really our day job. So we have to do that on top of the whole thing. But it's a learning experience. And so that's good going forward. It will be helpful, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's worth calling out that the company also lost a resource in that part,
Yeah.
which is the Mozilla reps.
Hmm.
Like the localizers are a very motivated group of people who care about language, but they don't always like care about like organizing the events or like traveling.
Yeah.
On the other end, reps were like kind of specialized in organizing events and like
Yeah. So we
talking
kind
with
of
people.
could fit together. Yes.
So that was helping a lot when it came
Hmm.
to organizing a different country where we don't have staff, for example.
Right.
But again, we hear you. We are looking into it. It's not easy, so bear with us because it's very, very slow.
Great. Thanks for that update. I'm sure people are happy to hear what's going on and it's not all in a vacuum or anything. So yeah. Um, is there anything else that you wanted to cover, Flood, today? I see we're
No,
actually 1 minute. We're actually on time. We're just 1 minute past for
I don't know
once.
if there are any questions either
No,
from.
so I have one thing I wanted to call out is that someone did comment on YouTube that they didn't know that it could ever break the builds doing that kind of errors. So that may be something that we
So
could maybe
don't feel bad. I
don't feel
would
bad.
blame Android and not you.
I
The
told
the
them
Android
that there are
build
other
is
people doing that.
very delicate, let's put it that way. Like Firefox, we build the build system for Firefox to be able to recover from basically any error.
Hmm.
The Android build system depends from Android and is not as even close as stable as the Firefox build system. So yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
and
that's
we know that we need to improve the tools on our side. We know that the work that we need to do, and we hope to be able to do it by the end of the year.
okay. Great. So I'm not seeing any other questions either on Matrix or YouTube. Um, but I think it was really good to go over this because some people learned. And yeah, as I said, this is going to be recorded unless there's anything else, or last thoughts, last comments. I'm not seeing anything. I think we can wrap this up. Um, the form that I sent out with pictures, that's like a permanent form. So if you still have the link and you want us to answer questions in the next office hour, feel free to add that. I'm going to share that again. I'll be sharing also kind of a satisfaction form at one point to understand. Please reply to that if you've been here. Um, and I think that's pretty much it. I really appreciate your time. As I said, live and recorded, same links. And we look forward to your feedback. And thank you so much, Flood, for giving us all this information.
Thank you for organizing, and once again, thanks to all people who spend time supporting Mozilla products and
Yeah,
localization.
for sure. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.